On June 30th, 2026, the Los Angeles Clippers agreed to trade Kawhi Leonard, a two-time NBA Finals MVP, to the Toronto Raptors. 9 days later, that trade was frozen. Not because of an injury, and not because of money, but because of an ongoing NBA investigation into a $28 million endorsement deal, one the league is examining for possible salary cap violations. The Clippers deny any wrongdoing. Kawhi Leonard disputes that the deal was ever a no-show job, and as of today, the NBA still hasn't issued a final ruling. What we do know for certain is this. A completed trade, one of the biggest of the offseason, is sitting frozen because of a company that no longer exists, and a paper trail that's now impossible to ignore. In modern NBA history, formally agreed trades rarely get paused this way once the terms are set, which is part of why this situation has drawn so much attention around the league. The deal would have sent Leonard back to the city where he won his first championship, in exchange for Brandon Ingram, Grady Dick, 2 unprotected first-round picks in 2031 and 2033, a 2027 first-round pick swap, and 2 second-round picks. It landed in the middle of one of the most seismic NBA offseasons in years, one that also saw Giannis Antetokounmpo leave Milwaukee and Jaylen Brown traded out of Boston. But even in that company, the Leonard deal stood out, because it was the one that actually stopped moving. For Toronto, it was supposed to be the move that finally pushed them back into contention. For a few days in early July, it looked done. Then, on July 9th, the Raptors released a statement. The league had informed them that if the trade closed, Toronto would be the one assuming the risk of any penalty Leonard might eventually face. So Toronto chose to wait. In the days after, Grady Dick started showing up around the Clippers facility. Brandon Ingram didn't. That gap alone was enough to send speculation through the league that Los Angeles might still try to reshape the deal before it becomes official, though nothing has confirmed that. By July 16th, insider Shams Charania reported that a resolution was still weeks away, and league sources have since indicated a ruling isn't even expected until after Las Vegas Summer League wraps up. Commissioner Adam Silver has given no fixed timeline, and when reporters have pushed him on it, he's reminded them that the conclusions people reach are sometimes completely false. That's a fair caution, but at the NBA's Board of Governors meetings this week, Silver did go slightly further than before, saying the league is hopeful the whole thing gets wrapped up before next season starts. He was also careful to clarify one thing directly. The league itself never paused the trade. Toronto and Los Angeles chose to hold it themselves while the investigation runs its course. Silver has also acknowledged separately that the league holds broad authority to penalize a franchise if the investigation concludes the rules were actually broken, which is part of why neither side is willing to move until the process plays out. But the risk was serious enough that Toronto chose to pause a completed agreement rather than move forward, and 2 rosters full of players are now sitting in limbo because of it. To understand why, you have to go back 5 years, to a summer when Kawhi Leonard's own advisor made a set of requests that, on paper, look strikingly close to what investigators are examining right now. In the summer of 2019, Leonard was the most sought-after free agent in basketball, fresh off leading Toronto to its first championship, a run where he averaged just over 30 points a game and delivered one of the most famous shots in NBA history, a Game 7 buzzer beater that bounced 4 times before it fell. According to reporting that has resurfaced since the current investigation began, his uncle and advisor, Dennis Robertson, approached the Raptors, the Lakers, and the Clippers with requests that would have violated NBA rules if any team had agreed to them. Partial ownership of the franchise, unlimited access to a private plane, a new house, and no-show endorsement income. Those specific requests were first reported by ESPN's Baxter Holmes, and years later, reporters covering the Aspiration story would note how closely they resembled what the league is now examining. The league investigated at the time and found no evidence that any team had actually provided those benefits, and the case was closed. Leonard signed with the Clippers that summer. But the specific shape of those old requests is exactly why, 2 years later, a very different set of numbers started catching the league's attention. In September of 2021, Clippers owner Steve Ballmer personally invested $50 million into a company called Aspiration, a self-described green bank founded in 2013, co-founded by an entrepreneur named Joe Sandberg, and built around a pitch of carbon-conscious banking and automatic tree planting for everyday purchases, one that had already attracted a strange mix of celebrity backers, including Drake, Leonardo DiCaprio, and even Clippers head coach Doc Rivers. Around that same time, Leonard signed a 4-year, $176 million extension with the Clippers. And that same September, Aspiration signed a $300 million sponsorship deal with the team, becoming the first founding partner of the Clippers' new arena, the Intuit Dome. 3 separate agreements, all within weeks of each other. On their own, none of them broke any rules. It's worth pausing here to understand what Aspiration actually was, because none of this makes sense otherwise. Founded in 2013, it marketed itself as a pay what is fair bank, letting customers set their own fees, while promising that deposits would never fund fossil fuels and that a tree would be planted with every purchase. It earned B Corp certification, was named one of the best for the world companies 5 separate times, and at its peak in 2021, claimed more than 5 million customer accounts. It raised over $870 million from investors, including Leonardo DiCaprio, who joined as an investor and advisor in 2019, along with Robert Downey Jr., Cindy Crawford, and Orlando Bloom. That same year, Aspiration was actually pushing for something bigger than a jersey patch, the naming rights to the Clippers' new arena. It lost that bid. What it landed instead was the $300 million founding partner deal. And separately, the company was chasing a deal to go public through a SPAC merger that would have valued it at $2.3 billion. None of that ever happened. But 7 months later, in April of 2022, Leonard's own company signed a 4th deal, this one directly with Aspiration. 4 years. $28 million. And according to documents that surfaced in later reporting, Leonard wasn't required to do much of anything to earn it. He could reportedly decline any marketing request the company made of him and still get paid, as long as one condition held. He had to remain on the Clippers roster. A separate side agreement, reported by the Boston Sports Journal, added another $20 million in company stock, pushing his total potential payout past $48 million, just under what Ballmer had put into the company to begin with. Here's why that structure matters, and why it isn't just accounting trivia. Under the NBA's rules, every team operates under the same salary cap, so that no single owner can simply outspend the system to keep a star player happy. If a company tied to an owner pays a player money that has nothing to do with actual marketing value, that's not a sponsorship anymore. It's compensation, funneled through a side door. Think about it like this. If Nike pays LeBron James tens of millions a year, that's genuine commercial value, tied to shoe sales that have nothing to do with which roster he's on. The question with Aspiration is whether that same logic applied, or whether the $28 million was tied to one single line item instead, staying a Clipper. That's the exact question NBA investigators are trying to answer here. Whether Aspiration's deal with Leonard had real commercial value, or whether it functioned as extra pay tied to him simply staying with the Clippers. Nobody outside the investigation knows the answer yet. But the money trail is specific enough that the league clearly believes it's worth answering. This isn't the first time the league has gone down this road. And the last time it happened, the punishment was severe. Back in 2000, the Minnesota Timberwolves signed forward Joe Smith to a series of cut-rate 1-year deals, with a secret side agreement promising him a 7-year, $86 million contract once his bird rights kicked in. When the league found out, Commissioner David Stern didn't hold back. Minnesota lost 5 straight first-round draft picks, 2 of which were later returned. The team was fined $3.5 million, the stiffest penalty the league had ever handed down at the time. Smith's contract was voided outright, and his bird rights were stripped. General manager Kevin McHale was forced to take a year-long leave of absence, and owner Glenn Taylor was suspended for a year as well. It remains the only salary cap circumvention case in NBA history that's actually been proven and punished, which is exactly why it resurfaced the moment the Aspiration story broke. Smith himself has weighed in on the Leonard situation directly, telling reporters this month that he's tired of having his name dragged back into headlines every time a case like this surfaces, half joking that the league should just go ahead and call it the Joe Smith effect. Since 2000, the league's own collective bargaining agreement has softened some of those penalties on paper, but nobody knows for certain what a modern version of that punishment would look like, because nobody has tested it in 25 years. If the Clippers become the second team to cross that line, the Joe Smith case is the only real blueprint the league has for how far it's willing to go. On December 15, 2022, Aspiration wired $1.75 million to Leonard's company, a scheduled installment on the deal. 9 days earlier, a different Clippers minority owner, this one named Dennis Wong, no relation to Leonard's advisor, had personally invested close to $2 million into Aspiration, and on the very same day Leonard received that payment, Aspiration laid off 20% of its own staff. In 2023, 2 former Aspiration employees filed a whistleblower complaint with the Securities and Exchange Commission, alleging the payments to Leonard were designed to help the Clippers get around the salary cap. Filed under penalty of perjury, the complaint went further, describing the arrangement as an incentivized bonus to circumvent the salary cap, dressed up as a marketing agreement. One former staffer in Aspiration's finance department was even more direct about it later, telling Pablo Torre the arrangement was built to circumvent the cap, and adding, almost as an afterthought, the word "lol." Whether that characterization holds up under an actual NBA investigation is now part of what the league is trying to determine. None of this reached the public until September of 2025, when journalist Pablo Torre released a series of podcast episodes laying out the entire timeline, backed by internal documents and interviews with former Aspiration employees. His reporting also surfaced some stranger details along the way, including an early marketing concept that would have reimagined Leonard as a tree-like superhero character, an idea that was reportedly killed before it ever saw daylight. Steve Ballmer responded publicly, saying he'd been, in his own words, conned by Aspiration, and denying any knowledge of the $28 million deal, even though it was Ballmer himself who had originally introduced the company to Leonard. At Clippers Media Day that same month, Leonard addressed the story directly for the first time, telling reporters that nobody in the organization had done anything wrong and that he welcomed the investigation. Within days, the NBA brought in outside legal counsel to lead a formal inquiry, the same firm the league had previously used to investigate the Donald Sterling and Robert Sarver ownership scandals. That comparison isn't a small one. The Sterling investigation ended in a lifetime ban and a forced sale of the Clippers in 2014. The Sarver investigation, wrapped up in 2022, led to a one-year suspension, a $10 million fine, and eventually his own sale of the Phoenix Suns and Mercury the following year. That choice doesn't prove guilt. It shows how seriously the league treats an allegation like this one. Ballmer has since sat for multiple interviews with those investigators himself, including a follow-up meeting in New York as recently as last week, according to reporting from ESPN. 8 months later, in May of 2026, Torre's reporting won the Pulitzer Prize. While the NBA's investigation into the Clippers continued, the company at the center of it was already collapsing on its own. Aspiration went fully bankrupt in 2025, and separately, federal prosecutors built a case against its co-founder, Joseph Sandberg, accusing him of defrauding investors and lenders out of $248 million. Prosecutors laid out specific mechanics behind the scheme, including one instance where Sandberg allegedly helped secure a $55 million loan by submitting forged brokerage statements to make a business partner look far wealthier than he actually was. When the bankruptcy filings became public, they showed just how tangled the relationship had gotten. Leonard's own company, KL2 Aspire, was listed as one of Aspiration's biggest creditors, owed $7 million. The Clippers were listed as the single largest creditor of all, owed more than $30 million. The team has said it had already cut ties with Aspiration back during the 2022-23 season, once the company defaulted on its side of the agreement. In October of 2025, Sandberg pleaded guilty to 2 counts of wire fraud. In June of 2026, a federal judge sentenced him to 14 years in prison, calling his conduct, in the judge's own words, among the worst he had encountered in his career on the bench, and telling the courtroom the case had touched almost every badge of fraud he had ever seen. It's worth being precise here, because it's easy to blur these two stories together. Sandberg's conviction is about defrauding Aspiration's own investors and lenders. It does not, on its own, prove that the Clippers or Leonard violated the NBA's salary cap. They are two separate cases, connected only by the same collapsing company running through the middle of both of them. The investigation into the Clippers hasn't gone away because Sandberg is behind bars. If anything, it's grown. According to reporting from The Athletic, the NBA is now also looking into a previously unreported second endorsement agreement, along with questions about whether the Clippers covered personal expenses for Leonard that were never properly disclosed. Investigators from Wachtell, Lipton, Rosen, and Katz, the same outside firm the league used for the Sterling and Sarver cases, have now been on this for close to 11 months. And some team executives who spoke anonymously to national outlets have called it one of the longest-running investigations the league has undertaken in the modern era. Along the way, The Athletic reported that the firm turned up old marketing artwork for that scrapped Aspiration campaign, concept images that reportedly reimagined Leonard as a character resembling Marvel's Groot, built around the company's tree-planting pledge. It never launched, but it's now just another exhibit in the same file investigators are picking apart. The Clippers, for their part, have kept repeating the same message throughout. Responding to news of the expanded scope, the organization said it had fully cooperated for 10 months straight, sitting through dozens of interviews and handing over tens of thousands of documents, while maintaining that Ballmer and the team were victims of Sandberg's fraud not participants in it.
The
Leonard's
endorsement deal that
advisor,
you had
the
with
man
company
reporters now
that-
simply
that
call
was-
Uncle
that's been
Dennis,
talked about.
has also sat for his own round of interviews with investigators, alongside Ballmer, other Clippers executives, and staff from Aspiration itself. Back in February, at All-Star Weekend, hosted that year at the Clippers' own arena, Silver confirmed the league had no plans to move the event, even with the investigation still open. If investigators ultimately conclude that the salary cap was deliberately circumvented, the possible consequences range from fines to lost draft picks, and in the most extreme scenario, the voiding of Leonard's contract entirely. It's almost the exact same menu of penalties the league used on Minnesota 25 years ago. Nothing has been decided yet. For now, the Raptors appear willing to wait it out, betting that whatever penalty eventually comes down won't be severe enough to blow up the deal completely, while Ingram, Dick, and everyone else attached to this trade simply wait to find out where they'll actually be playing next season. With Raptors training camp set to open September 28th, giving the investigation a real but not unlimited runway to close this out before that clock runs down. For two players who were already told they were moving on, that limbo isn't just a business abstraction. It affects where they train this summer and which locker room they actually belong to. Strip away the trade talk and the draft picks, and the question underneath all of this is fairly simple. How far is a franchise allowed to go to keep its championship window open? And who ends up accountable when the numbers stop adding up cleanly? Ballmer says he was a victim. Leonard says he did nothing wrong. And Joseph Sandberg is the only person in this entire story who has admitted, under oath, to breaking the law. 25 years ago, the league answered a version of this same question by stripping 5 draft picks from a small market franchise and suspending its front office for a year. Whether the NBA is willing to go anywhere near that far against one of its most powerful owners is the real test now sitting in front of Adam Silver. The trade is still on hold. The NBA hasn't ruled. And until it does, the Clippers, the Raptors, and Kawhi Leonard himself are all waiting on the exact same answer.